All right, hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is Eric, and this is the other CEDH, where the C stands for casual. We're your one-stop shop for all things casual, kitchen table, Magic, the Gathering. Thank you for joining me here today. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I personally thought that the first episode went so well that we're doing another one. That's right, it's time for episode 2 of Tips and Tricks for Beginning EDH Players. What are we going to focus on for today's episode? Today we're going to be looking at improving your threat assessment. Threat assessment is a huge piece of learning to be a better commander player and being able to win a game. Keeping your opponent's threats off the table so that you can get your own win conditions to stick is crucial for a game like Magic the Gathering. I hear a lot of people talk about how their threat assessment could be better, so we're going to give you a few pointers so that you know what to look for, how to best utilize your removal, and how to bargain with other players at the table so you can clear a path to victory. So without further ado, let's get into the finer points of threat assessment, shall we? Tip number 3. Learn which threats at the table will hurt your opponents more than they hurt you, and learn how to capitalize on that. What exactly do I mean by this? Let's look at some gameplay theory that will maybe help to illustrate my point. You're playing a mono green deck with Marwyn the Nurturer at the helm, because of course you are. She's great. She's elf tribal and a ton of fun. Maybe you even looked at a deck list on Tapped Out that someone was kind enough to provide to you and you've been playing it and you're having a ton of fun with it? Yeah, that was a shameless plug, sorry. Anyway, you're halfway through the game, you've been dropping a ton of elves and Marwyn is huge. Maybe you've got an aspect of Mongoose attached to her and she's getting really annoying to deal with. All of a sudden, one of your opponents drops a Rest in Peace. Ugh, this card is so annoying. Or is it? Now, green does have a bit of graveyard recursion, but in the case of Marwyn, if you've built your deck correctly, Rest in Peace is not going to be a big problem for you. There are very few things, at least in my build of that deck, very few things that have a dice trigger or a put into the graveyard trigger that is going to matter to you because you're not bouncing stuff in and out of your graveyard. So Rest in Peace, not too big a problem from your perspective. Now, let's say someone else at the table has a deck that is being commanded by Shiri, Shiso's Caretaker. For this player, if Rest in Peace doesn't go bye-bye, I just, bye, see you later. I'm not doing anything else this game. Because Shiri wants to sack creatures over and over again for value because she can just bounce them right back into play. But with Rest in Peace out, their entire deck is just shut off until it gets off the table. And especially with them being in mono black, they're going to have an awfully hard time getting rid of it. Now, you're in mono green, which has all kinds of great ways to deal with enchantments, but now you're presented with an interesting situation. This enchantment doesn't really hurt me all that much, but I can get rid of it. The bigger question is, are you the one that needs to get rid of it? Sure, you could get it off the table and try and help out the mono black player whose game just got shut down by this enchantment, but look at it this way. That enchantment just took one player completely out of the game, and they are no longer a threat to you. Another interesting way to look at this scenario, if you do remove the Rest in Peace, you can either try to convince the mono black player that you are doing them a favor by removing it and keep them off your back and convince them not to target you, at which point you can hope that they hold to their end of the deal. Or you could let it stick and hope that this will knock that player out and give you a better chance for victory. This sort of thing requires politics and being a smooth talker, so this piece of advice comes with a caveat. Politics do not always work. There are some tables where players simply are not political at all, which quite frankly I've never really understood, because to me that's one of the things that makes this format so special and appealing, which is that all 4 people are trying to solve a puzzle, and that puzzle is based around the resources at hand. And one of the things I think people forget quite often is that the other players are a resource for you to utilize. If you can mitigate one threat and keep one person off your back long enough to draw into something that will help you win the game, it is an option that to me, a lot of the time, is worth exploring. And to me, a person that you play commander with that just straight up says, "Oh, I never politic with anyone," quite frankly comes across as an arrogant dickhead that's probably playing way too spiky and should probably die first anyway. So learn your playgroup, learn what the decks at the table do, and learn when you can politic and when politicking will be to your benefit. Tip number 2. Always hold mana open, even if you don't have an answer in hand. If any of you have ever played poker, this is what we like to call a bluff, and you would be surprised at how often this will work. This is especially helpful if you're playing blue, which has a lot of counter magic at its disposal. Any player that looks around the table and sees blue mana untapped on their turn is going to have to question whether or not the bombs that they are about to drop are actually going to stick. And if a player sees blue mana untapped, if they're a good player, they'll think twice about trying to mess with your board. Even if the blue player has tapped out, there's always a chance they're running a Force of Will, Pact of Negation, Force of Negation, or even Misdirect, which makes blue especially powerful in this regard. Even having a single green or red mana source open on someone else's turn presents them with a tricky situation because you could always be running something like an Autumn's Veil or a red Elemental Blast, or in the case of red, even a Reverberate, a Reiterate, or a Fork. Mono white even has things like Lapse of Certainty and Mana Tithe, which are not great, but your opponents are going to think twice about underestimating you the first time they get countered by a deck running OG Avacyn at the helm. Again, holding open even a single mana when it's not your turn will deter a lot of heat coming at you. The only time you should really tap out on any of your turns is when you're utilizing all of your mana that will put you into a position where you can just win the game. And finally, our number one tip for better threat assessment: ask yourself this one simple question anytime an opponent casts a spell, and this question will lead you to get further in any game of Commander that you play and will probably even increase your win percentage significantly. Here it is, tip number one: ask yourself, how does this card affect my odds of winning this game? Always ask yourself that question every time a card hits the table. If the answer is greatly, then it's a problem that should be dealt with, and you should not hesitate in order to utilize your resources in order to deal with it. This is especially true if someone is making a play that will just flat out win them the game. If someone drops a Triumph of the Hordes and you have Rout in your hand and that you can cast and have the mana to cast it, feel free to utilize it. If the entire table is going to lose, that means that you're going to lose, so keeping every other player alive is going to benefit you tremendously, especially since everyone will be in on the fact that the player that played the Triumph of the Hordes is now trying to win, in which case everyone can team up to get rid of that player. Again, not every Commander player plays a political game, but there are times where it is advantageous to pool all of your collective resources together if it means the difference between one person shooting into a huge lead and all the rest of you losing the game. This is another instance where it helps you know your playgroup, know the decks at the table, and learn when to hold open answers and learn the correct time to land the killing blow. Again, these are not hard and fast rules, but merely suggestions that you should carry into each and every game no matter who you play Commander with. I think that if you adhere to these 3 simple tips and tricks, you're going to find that even if you don't increase your win percentage, you will last a lot longer into these sorts of long-running multiplayer games and will just overall have a better play experience. So that about wraps up episode 2 of Tips and Tricks for Beginning EDH Players. The first episode of the series did quite well, and I would like to continue doing more of these. So if you have any suggestions for topics that we should cover on future episodes, feel free to comment in this video, or even drop by our Facebook page and let us know what you'd like to see featured in an upcoming episode. Again, my name is Eric, this has been the Other CEDH, and we will see you all later.